The beverage industry spends literally billions of dollars every single year, just trying to engineer the loudest, punchiest flavors on earth. I mean, they want that neon pink can that jumps right off the shelf at you.
Oh, absolutely. They want maximum impact
Yeah,
immediately.
but the secret to the drinks you actually buy twice, like the ones that earn a permanent spot in your fridge, it's actually a spiky desert cactus fruit that is basically engineered to be ignored.
Yeah, it sounds completely backwards when you put it like that.
It totally does. I mean, think about that for a second. You're staring at that massive wall of brightly colored bottles at the grocery store, and they're all screaming for your attention.
Right. The choice paralysis is real.
Exactly. So you pick something new, you take a sip, and it just blasts your taste buds. But do you ever actually go back to the store to buy it a second time?
Well, that is the multi-million-dollar question in the beverage world, right?
No.
Securing a repeat purchase in a totally saturated market is incredibly difficult.
I can only imagine.
And the irony here is that hitting the consumer with maximum flavor intensity, which, is what most brands instinctively do, it usually achieves the exact opposite of a repeat sale. Palate fatigue just sets in immediately.
Which brings us to today's deep dive.
Oh.
We are peeling back the curtain on the hidden philosophy of beverage formulation.
It's a fascinating world once you get into it.
It really is. And our guide for this is an insider brief published just a couple of days ago on April 21st, 2026. It's from a commercial fruit puree supplier called Pear.
Yeah, they're major players in the supply chain side of things.
Right. So the brief is titled Prickly Pear in Beverages, Flavor, Balance, and Formulation. And our mission today is to understand how this one highly unexpected ingredient, the prickly pear, is quietly revolutionizing the drinks we consume.
And it's doing it in a really subtle way.
Exactly, by mastering the art of, well, not trying too hard.
That concept, not trying too hard, it really gets to the core dilemma that beverage makers face. I mean, if you step into a boardroom where a brand is trying to formulate a new drink, the conversation almost always hits a wall.
Let's imagine that boardroom for a second. You've got a team sitting around a table, sales are flat, and someone inevitably says, we need something completely different to shake up the market.
Oh, yeah. Different is a dangerous word in food science.
Right, because they don't necessarily mean louder or sweeter. The Pear brief points out that strawberry is, just too familiar at this point.
Yeah, everyone is strawberry.
And mango is way too predictable, while apple is just too safe. So they need a wild card. And that is usually the exact moment prickly pear enters the conversation.
Because when a brand demands something different, the amateur instinct is to just turn up the volume. Make it punchier, add more acid, pack in more sugar to carry the flavor.
Just blast the consumer.
Exactly. But when you do that, you exhaust the consumer's palate. A massive hit of mango might taste incredible in the very first sip, but by ounce number 8, your taste receptors are just overwhelmed.
You don't even want to finish the can.
Let alone buy a six-pack.
Yeah.
So prickly pear is really the antithesis of that volume knob approach.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second because I have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
Is prickly pear just the indie movie of the fruit world?
Indie movie?
Yeah, what I mean is, are these beverage executives just throwing a tiny drop of it into the vat so they can print wild cactus prickly pear and some cool font on the label? Like, is it just a marketing gimmick to sound sophisticated, or is it actually doing heavy lifting in the liquid itself?
What's fascinating here is that it's tempting to write it off as a label grab, but this is entirely about chemistry.
Really? Not just marketing?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Yes, the name looks fantastic on a matte finish aluminum can, but experienced formulation teams are choosing this fruit for what it physically does to the other ingredients.
Oh, interesting.
Prickly pear has an incredibly rare capability to show up in a flavor profile without taking it over. It secures the repeat customer by making the whole drink feel cohesive, rather than, just trying to be the star of the show.
Let's get into the actual anatomy of that flavor then, because understanding the science of it really changes how you look at the drinks sitting in your fridge.
It completely shifts your perspective.
Right. So the brief describes the flavor profile as lightly sweet, subtly floral, and bright without being sharp. But what does that actually mean on a chemical level? How does a fruit manage to be bright but not sharp?
Well, it comes down to its specific natural composition. Specifically, it's about the ratio of sugars, organic acids, and water content.
Okay, break that down for me.
Think about a lemon. A lemon is extremely bright, right? But it's loaded with citric acid, which creates this really sharp, biting spike on the tongue.
Yeah, that pucker feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On the other extreme, think of a ripe peach or a mango. Very sweet, but heavy. High sugar, very dense on the palate. Prickly pear sits precisely in the middle of that spectrum.
So it's kind of a Goldilocks fruit.
Exactly. It contains malic and citric acids,
Yeah.
but in a much gentler ratio. And that's combined with a very clean, high-water structure.
So because it sits right in the middle of the spectrum, it isn't fighting the other ingredients for dominance.
Right. It plays well with others.
It's not dragging the pH down to some harsh acidic level, and it's not spiking the sugar levels, right, into a syrupy mess. It actually makes me think of a rock band.
Oh, I like this.
Oh.
Where are you going with this?
Well, if Strawberry and Mango are the lead guitarists, like, they want to be right up at the front of the stage playing this massive, blistering solo clon, then Prickly Pear is the bass player.
Ah, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
The bass player doesn't want the spotlight. The bass player just wants to lock in the groove, bind the drums to the melody, and basically make the entire song sound infinitely richer.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it.
Yeah.
And veteran formulators deeply recognize the value of that bass player.
Because you can't have a band with 5 lead guitarists.
Exactly. They know that if every single ingredient in a formulation is screaming at the top of its lungs, the beverage is fundamentally exhausting to consume.
It's just noise.
Right. The ultimate goal in formulation, the metric that truly drives billions in revenue, is balance. Balance is the purely chemical reason a drink is easy to come back to.
I want to see how this invisible bass player actually performs in the real world. The Puree Arete brief looks at its impact across several completely different categories.
Yeah, they cover a lot of ground.
Let's start with something traditional, like cold-pressed juices. If I go to a premium juice bar, these drinks are usually, I don't know, heavy, they're thick, they can almost feel like a full meal.
Which is exactly the problem formulators face with cold-pressed juice. You want the nutritional density, but you definitely don't want the texture of baby food.
Ugh, yeah, nobody wants to chew their juice.
Right. So in this environment, prickly pear acts as a foundation. It introduces a clean, refreshing hydration base. Because of its subtle floral notes and high water content, it prevents the juice from feeling overworked.
And it specifically pairs incredibly well with citrus and berry, according to the brief. If you think about the chemistry you just mentioned, that makes total sense.
It balances them out perfectly.
Yeah, the prickly pear lays down this smooth foundation, which allows the sharp citrus to add a quick pop of brightness, and the dark berries to add those deep, lingering notes without any of them just crashing into each other.
Precisely. It stretches out the flavor without diluting the actual taste.
That's a neat trick.
Now, compare that juice environment to craft brewing, which is a totally different beast.
Oh yeah, brewing is practically alchemy.
Exactly. Beer is a highly delicate, volatile chemical environment. You have yeast, malt, hops, and fermentation to worry about. Brewers are obsessed with prickly pear because it respects the base beer.
It doesn't step on anyone's toes.
Right. It doesn't compete with the complex hop profiles or the roasted malts.
It just adds a subtle aroma, maybe a vibrant pinkish red color, and a slightly sweet finish. But wait, let me stop you there.
Sure. What's up?
It seems counterintuitive, right? Why would a craft brewer, who is already running on razor-thin profit margins, spend money on an ingredient that basically vanishes into the beer?
That's a fair question.
Like, if it's just adding a hint of color and some background finish, aren't they just wasting money on a ghost ingredient?
It sounds totally illogical until you look at consumer behavior at a bar.
Yeah.
In brewing, particularly with lighter styles like lagers, pilsners, or fruited sours, the return on investment isn't maximum flavor per sip.
What is it then?
The ROI is drinkability. If a brewer uses a heavy, syrupy fruit puree, the customer drinks one pint, feels completely weighed down, and asks for the check.
Ah, because palate fatigue sets in.
Exactly. But prickly pear ferments out incredibly clean. It lifts the beverage, clears the palate, and maintains that elusive quality of refreshment.
So it keeps them at the bar.
That subtle ghost ingredient is the exact mechanism that dictates whether the customer orders a second pint or goes home. It literally drives the second sale.
Okay, so if it works perfectly as a subtle lifter in a delicate beer, what happens when we introduce it to something truly aggressive?
Oh, you mean the functional stuff?
Yeah, I'm talking about the heavyweight division of the beverage industry, the hardest formulations to pull off: functional drinks, ready-to-drink cocktails, and cannabis-infused products.
This is where food science gets genuinely difficult. With functional drinks, beverages loaded with nootropics, adaptogens, or heavy vitamins, you are dealing with base ingredients that naturally taste like dirt, rust, or bitter bark.
Right. I see functional on labels all the time, and honestly, I've tried a few that literally tasted like liquid at Penny.
That metallic tang is brutal to hide. And with cannabis derivatives, you have incredibly harsh, lingering botanical oils.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because for the ready-to-drink cocktails, the brief says prickly pear adds character without complication. It's recognizable, but approachable.
It smooths out the alcohol bite.
Right. But the cannabis section of this brief is what really grabbed me. It refers to prickly pear as a fixer.
A fixer. I love that term for it.
Yeah, it says it softens those harsh, bitter botanical notes and supports balance across the entire tasting experience. It explicitly says, and I quote, well, actually, I'm paraphrasing, but it says it's not about masking. It's about making the entire product feel more complete.
The distinction between masking and completing is the difference between a failing brand and a national bestseller.
Can we break that down? Because when I hear masking, I immediately think of like spraying a really cheap, overpowering air freshener in a dirty room.
That is a very visceral image, but yes.
You aren't fixing the room, you're just creating a new, weirder smell right on top of the bad one. So if masking is the cheap air freshener, how does prickly pear actually complete the flavor profile? Is it more like an audio equalizer?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the audio equalizer is the perfect analogy, and we can look at exactly how it works on the human tongue.
Okay, I'm listening.
When amateur formulators try to mask a bitter adaptogen or a harsh cannabis extract, they dump in excessive sugar or a blasting dose of artificial cherry flavor.
Just trying to overwhelm the bad taste.
Right. They turn the volume of the snare drum all the way up to drown out the bass. But the consumer's palate is smart. You taste the bitter chemical, and you taste the extreme sugar desperately trying to hide it. The frequencies are totally clashing.
It's basically a war in the can.
A war in the can, and the consumer always loses. Prickly pear, on the other hand, acts like a master sound engineer at the mixing board.
How so?
Because of its specific organic acid profile, it chemically binds with and smooths out the bitter botanical receptors on your tongue.
Oh, wow. It physically changes how you taste the bitterness.
Exactly. It literally turns down the harsh frequencies of the cannabis or the vitamins, while its subtle floral notes boost the mid-range. It builds a bridge between those difficult, earthy ingredients and your palate, resulting in a finish that feels remarkably clean.
So it doesn't hide the harsh notes, it physically integrates them. That is an absolutely brilliant way to look at food science.
It really changes the game for formulators.
Which actually brings us to why Pear even published this in the first place. Because zooming out, this deep dive isn't just about a neat cactus fruit. It's really an overarching philosophy of consumer psychology and supply chain precision.
It has to be, because executing that level of subtlety requires zero margin for error.
You can't mess it up.
No, if you are relying on prickly pear to act as an equalizer, your inputs have to be flawless. If your puree supplier sends you a batch that is slightly too acidic or, slightly too sweet, the entire formulation collapses. The bass player is out of tune.
Which is why the brief hammers home the importance of reliable batch-to-batch specifications. Consistency and clean inputs are what give a formulation team the confidence to even attempt to build a subtle drink.
You can't balance a high wire act if the wire keeps changing tension.
So what does this all mean? The golden rule they present is pretty simple. Think in terms of balance, not dominance. Let the ingredients support the system rather than trying to carry the whole thing on its back.
Focus on the entire experience, from the first sip to the lingering finish, not just the initial punch.
Exactly.
This raises an important question, though. It forces you to look at your own buying habits as a consumer.
Oh, totally.
We are constantly targeted by the loudest, flashiest marketing, the neon cans that promise an absolute explosion of wild flavor.
Yeah.
But when we audit our own fridges and pantries...
The things we actually buy week after week.
Exactly. The products we make a permanent part of our daily routines are almost never the loudest ones. They're the ones designed to quietly, reliably support us. The ones that prioritize a balanced experience over screaming for our attention.
Yeah, the novelty of an explosion wears off after one can, but balance is forever.
Balance drives the bottom line.
To wrap up our deep dive today, I think the core takeaway from the Pear brief is that prickly pear is the ultimate team player in the beverage world.
Without a doubt.
Whether it is bringing a clean, hydrating foundation to a really dense cold-pressed juice, or whether it's acting as a master equalizer to soften the bitter frequencies of a functional or cannabis infusion.
Or even giving a craft brew that perfect touch of drinkability.
Exactly. Its absolute superpower is standing out by blending in.
It does the heavy lifting entirely in the background, making every other ingredient around it look better.
We've spent the last few minutes unpacking how this prickly pear principle works in food science.
Hmm.
Softening harsh edges, supporting the whole system, and valuing true balance over sheer dominance.
It's a great lesson in restraint.
It really is. But I want to leave you with a thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends. What if we took that exact same formulation strategy and applied it to our own lives?
Oh, that's an interesting pivot.
Think about your team at work. Who is the prickly pear in your office? That person who rarely demands the spotlight, but the moment they step into a project, everyone else's performance suddenly gets better?
Yeah, the sharp edges of the team dynamics just sort of soften.
Right, and the work just flows. Or, even more importantly, how can you apply this subtle, balancing approach to your own projects and relationships? We are so conditioned to believe that we always have to be the loudest voice in the room to be valued.
Society definitely rewards the loud ones.
It does. But sometimes being the one who bridges the gaps, smooths the harsh notes, and brings out the very best in the people around you, well, that might just be the most powerful and irreplaceable role you can possibly play.
I love that. Be the bass player.
Exactly, be the bass player. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. The next time you grab a new drink from the store and it just effortlessly feels right, do us a favor, spin the can around and check the label.
You might just find a little desert fruit working its quiet magic.
See you next time.